Hi there, this is Isaac in Ann Arbor. I'm going to go over some tips and best practices for getting an ROI EFS call on the phone. ROI is return on investment, of course, one of the two categories for Educate for Success. I'm going to go over a call I had with George recently. He called in wanting to know why his CPC had decreased over the last few weeks. I noticed here that he was eligible for EFS, for ROI, and instead of just jumping right into the EFS program, I wanted to start by answering his question. I let him know that, first of all, CPC going down is a really good thing, and then we talked about some reasons why it might have happened. As I looked at his account, I showed him how his CTR had been increasing as his CPC decreased. He told me about some changes he'd been making in the account recently to target his ads to a more specific region, to work on using different keywords, and this allowed us to get into a conversation about what CTR means. At that point, I let him know that he was part of EFS and that we were focusing on ROI, that it was a new exclusive program to help him use AdWords to get the best return on his investment for his business. We were able to answer his question by getting into some of the metrics, but then I also wanted to talk about his ultimate goals. His ultimate goal for his product was to sell butcher blocks, essentially online sales. We got into what tools he can use to make this happen. We talked about conversion tracking and Google Analytics and made sure that he had a clear understanding of all of the key metrics in his interface so that when he was troubleshooting on his own in the future, he would know what these different things meant in relation to one another. How clicks and impressions work together to make a click-through rate, why click-through rate has a correlation with cost per click, and essentially just an overview of all of the basic things he would want to look at when coming into his account. He was ready for a little bit more, so then I was able to get into a bit more detail with him on how Google Analytics would help him measure his ROI and how specifically conversion tracking is one of the key features for someone concerned about measuring online sales. Lastly, I asked him if he'd been receiving the monthly performance report. I actually knew that he had because when you go to his interaction history and you go to marketing, you can see that they've been receiving an email that looks kind of like this one. He said that yes, he'd been receiving it, but he hadn't really understood what it meant or what he was looking for. And now that he understood what impression share meant, ad rank meant, and etc., he was much more prepared to use this report to gain insights in the future and make changes to his account. Looking back on it, I'm pretty confident that it went well because if you look in his change history, right after we spoke around August 12th, you can see as we scroll down that a lot of changes were made to his account for the better. So I want to express that if you are using this in a way that it is, let's look at externally. If you're using EFS in a way that is tailored to the customer that you're talking to and it addresses their initial reason for calling in, right? You don't want it to be tangential and you don't want them to feel like they're not getting their problem solved. Just around that time, they might make a lot of changes that are actually, pretty beneficial to their own performance and good for us as well. So in summary, you want to make sure that all of the information that you're giving is relevant to that user specifically. And of course, you want to always follow up with the email so that they can have the guide. I like to put my guide linked in a larger font so they can definitely see it. And I also like to emphasize that it's exclusive and new. Anytime someone thinks that they're getting something that other people are not getting, they're a lot more likely to take advantage of it. So I always tell them to bookmark it, keep it, and definitely watch the videos. And that is how I talked about ROI with George. Thanks everyone for listening.